Hi everyone, today I'm going to be talking about my most anticipated releases for the rest of the year. There is a ton of stuff coming out over the next few months. I've never really paid that much attention to publication schedules before, but I wonder, do publishers tend to put the most anticipated books at the end of the year? I'm not really sure. Most of the books I'm going to be talking about in this video are all books by authors I've previously read at least something by, so if there are any really cool debuts coming out in the next few months, let me know about it down in the comments. I would really love to know if there are any new books by first-time authors that I should be looking forward to. It seems like about time to do one more anticipated releases for 2020 video, and then we'll be looking at 2021 already, which is hard to believe. For this video, I'll just go through my list in the order of release date rather than trying to rank in order of excitement. Coming out in just under a week on September 29th is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This is the first book in the Scholomance series. I am a big fan of Novik's Temeraire series. I read most of them before I eventually got sick of it, but overall, I really like that series. It's basically Master and Commander with dragons. I have not read her two more recent books that are based on fairy tales. I did try Spinning Silver a little while back and couldn't really get into it. I know people have really liked those two books, so I really should try them again. But I think the premise for this new series sounds so cool. On her website, she talks about how she always wondered, reading books, like what happens to all the kids that are not Harry Potter at Hogwarts? What is their education like? What is the experience like for people who are just studying at the magic school? And she talked about how as a kid, as a reader, she always wanted to know more about just like what was the school like, what was the experience like, and just expand the world. So I totally relate to that. That is very much how I feel when reading those kinds of books. I mentioned recently in my video of favorite tropes, I love school stories and I love that aspect of just getting to explore something new and find out how it works. So if that's how she feels as a reader and a writer, I feel like this should be something I really enjoy. The title of the series, The Scholomance, is apparently taken from old German folklore of a school for dark magic that was run by the devil and was underground. So that seems like a really cool premise as well, and I'm curious how she's going to use that in the series. So this is a series that I'm really looking forward to just because of the way she has talked about it and because of my love for school stories in general. Next we have on October 6th, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. The only books that I've read by V.E. Schwab are the Shades of Magic trilogy, which I solidly enjoyed but did not love. I thought they were basically okay, didn't really do anything beyond your typical fantasy book. But I, overall liked her writing and characters despite a few issues with the series, and I feel like I know she's a very popular author, and also the premise for this book sounds really cool. The idea is that there's a young woman who in 1715 sells her soul to the devil. Well, I don't know if she sells her soul to the devil, but she makes like a Faustian bargain that she's not going to ever age, but she also will be forgotten by everyone she meets. Nobody will ever be able to remember who she is. So I thought that was a really fascinating premise, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that plays out. It also kind of reminded me of that movie, The Age of Adeline, which I thought sounded really cool, and then I watched it and it wasn't very good. I am turning 30 next month, so maybe I'm having some sort of urge towards stories about young women that stay young forever. But no, honestly, I think I'm feeling pretty cool with the whole turning 30 thing. But I do think that this book sounds like a really cool premise. I like the idea of this story with this immortal character taking place across history, starting in the 1700s, I guess, and going up until the modern day. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I hope that it will be cool. So the next one is a pretty interesting one. It's also coming out on October 6th, and that is Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker. A. Deborah Baker is actually Shannon Maguire, and this is a book that existed in-world in the novel Middle Game. In the book Middle Game, there was a series of books, which this is the first one of, written by A. Deborah Baker, who was not actually an author, she was actually an alchemist, and these books contained all sorts of clues and references that had to do with the plot of Middle Game. So then Shannon Maguire decided to actually write the book, so I'm really curious to see what this will be like. I had mixed feelings about Middle Game, but I've been really loving Shannon Maguire's writing in general. I am in the middle of the Encrypted series, which has been super fun, and Middle Game is one of those books that while I had mixed feelings about it when I read it, honestly, it has kind of stuck with me in a lot of ways, even though it's not a perfect book. So I have no idea what to expect from Over the Woodward Wall. Is it going to be just a straightforward children's book that the author just got interested enough in to decide to actually write for real? I do think it's kind of funny that she wrote these excerpts from this imaginary book in Middle Game and then I guess she liked it so much that she decided she would just write the whole thing. So I'm expecting this to basically be a children's book, but I'm still kind of looking forward to it. I think it's a fun idea. And I think it's fun that she's publishing it under the name of the character who wrote the book in Middle Game. Another book that I read as part of my Hugo Awards reading project, like Middle Game, was The 10,000 Doors of January, which was the first novel by Alix Harrow. She has her next book coming out on October 13th, The Once and Future Witches. I think this also sounds really cool. I did not love The 10,000 Doors of January. I thought the writing was really good. There were certain things that I thought Alix Harrow did really, really well. I think where the book kind of let me down was more in the plot and the construction, but actually I really did like the writing style. The characters were pretty good, and I liked the way she integrated magic into a historical feel and a historical setting. So I think that The Once and Future Witches looks like it's going to do something very similar, and I find the description very appealing, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what this book will be like. The premise seems to be that there are 3 sisters that get involved in the suffragist movement in the 1890s, and they are trying to use magic to influence the fate of the suffragist movement. I think Suffragist Witches is a really cool idea and a really cool premise, and I hope that this book will be good. Alix Harrow was definitely an author that upon reading her debut, I just really wanted to see what she would do next. I hope that this will be a book that is really interesting and original. The next book I'm going to talk about is one I'm particularly excited for, and that's Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is coming out on October 13th. I read her first 2 novels in her 6th World series. The first one was Trail of Lightning, the second one was Storm of Locusts. I definitely enjoyed both books. I found them to be a bit too gritty urban fantasy with a protagonist with a dark, tormented past for my own personal taste, but I still thought that they were good, and I was looking forward to continuing to read her books. Black Sun seems like it's going to be something that's much more in the vein of the kind of book that I would usually pick up. So it's going to be the first book in an epic fantasy series inspired by the pre-Columbian Americas, which sounds really, really cool. It should be a lot larger in scope and have a lot of world building, a bigger cast of characters, and apparently a lot of politics and intrigue and that kind of stuff. So this seems much more like something that I would normally pick up or be into. I really love the idea of something inspired by the Americas. It's something that I haven't seen too much in fantasy so far. If I like Black Sun, I feel like this could be a series that I ended up being really excited about for a number of years, depending on how many books there are. So I'm not sure if this is supposed to be the first in a trilogy or a longer series, but I love the concept as it's been presented so far, and I'm really excited to give it a shot. So I like to joke about how I have to mention Rhythm of War in any list of books that's coming out this year, even though I'm not mentioning Rhythm of War on this list. So I am going to not mention Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, the next book in the Stormlight Archive, as part of this list. And if you don't know that it's coming out this November, you're either living under a rock or you're just not, in the same corner of BookTube that I am, which is totally fine. So I'm not mentioning Rhythm of War on this list, but I do want to mention something else by Brandon Sanderson that should be coming out in October, and that is the Stormlight Archive novella, Dawnshard. This is supposed to be set in between books 3 and book 4. He is currently writing it. He might be done or mostly done, I'm not sure. So this, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to get released. I actually gave $10 to the Way of Kings Leatherbound Kickstarter, even though I was not going to buy the Way of Kings Leatherbound, just so I could make sure to get this book when it came out. Honestly, I really secretly wanted the Way of Kings Leatherbound. It does look super beautiful, but I just do not need to spend $200 on a leatherbound fancy copy of a book that I already have on Kindle and in paperback just because it would look pretty on my shelf. I would probably be too scared to ever touch it. But looking at the pictures. Anyway, so Dawnshard is a novella. Like I said, it's set in between books 3 and 4. It's going to focus on some minor characters from the Stormlight Archive. Apparently about 75% is going to be Risen, and the other 25% point of view is going to be Lopin, who I think everybody, if you don't like Lopin as a character, maybe there's something wrong with you and you have no soul. I'm not sure. But I'm really looking forward to that. Honestly, I have had mixed feelings about Risen's arc so far, but I did see on Brandon Sanderson's Facebook that he put a call out for beta readers for the novella who are paraplegic, so he can try to be more accurate and realistic with Risen's experiences. So I'm hoping that that will give me like a better feeling about her arc so far. Honestly, I'm just hoping that I'll feel comfortable enough with how disability is portrayed in this book that it won't really affect my enjoyment of the novella, but I do appreciate his attempts to be more accurate and to get people who have had those experiences to weigh in. So I don't want that to dominate the novella for me. I'm hoping it'll just be a cool Stormlight adventure. So other than Rhythm of War, which I'm obviously not mentioning, we do have a couple of other November releases that I should talk about. The first one is Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter. There has been a lot of hype for Rage of Dragons on BookTube over the last year, and it's a book that I had kind of mixed feelings about as well. On the one hand, I was totally hooked, and I stayed up really late reading it, which is something I very rarely do these days. Overall, I have become enough of a grown-up that even when I'm really enjoying a book, I am tired enough at night that I put down whatever I'm reading and just pass out. On the other hand, the whole book kind of read like one long fight scene sometimes, and there were things about it that I found kind of tiresome, but I did like the writing, and I do see why people are finding this to be a really unique, new, original voice in fantasy, and I think that if Fires of Vengeance sort of takes things to the next level and gives me a little bit more of an expanded world and a little more of a wider plot, I will be much more interested in it. There were things about Rage of Dragons that I did like. Obviously, like I said, I totally couldn't put it down, so, it was very gripping, and I liked how the main character had to train and work his way up to achieve the level of skill and mastery that he had by the end of the book. It's definitely a series that I'm going to keep reading, even if it's not one of my personal favorites, because I feel like I see and like what the author is doing. The last anticipated release that I have for 2020 that I know of is The Burning God by R.F Kuang. This is the last book in the Poppy War trilogy. I really admire those of you that started reading the Poppy War this year and are then reading the Dragon Republic and trying to have the whole series finished this year. Personally, as much as I really enjoyed the Poppy War, I was super glad to have an entire year to recover from it before reading the Dragon Republic, and same with the Dragon Republic. I think it's taken me about until now to feel ready to read more books in that series. Just both books ended in a very intense, traumatizing way, and I felt a little mentally scarred by them. I mean, I think that R.F Kuang is a great writer. I am so impressed with what she's doing, and I think it's a great series. I would recommend it, but man, it is brutal and emotional and intense, and I'm sure I will be a little puddle of some sort of jello after I finish reading The Burning God, but I also really, really want to know what happens, and I'm gonna read it when it comes out, probably after Rhythm of War. So those are my most anticipated releases for the rest of 2020. I should also mention there are two books that came out recently that I haven't read yet that I'm meaning to read. The first one is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. This is something that I'm very curious about. I'll be honest, I did not like Aragon as a teenager. I had already been reading a lot of the adult fantasy that Christopher Paolini was deeply inspired by when he wrote Aragon. So I think for a lot of people of my generation, it was kind of one of their first forays into epic fantasy, and that's really great. But for me, I think it was just already, I could see where it was derivative. Now, I know that he continued to evolve as a writer while writing that series, and I'm sure he has improved a ton since he was 16. At least I sure hope so. So I'm very curious to see what this book is all about. I think the reviews have been generally positive so far, as much as I've heard. So yeah, I'm definitely intrigued. It wasn't on my top list of books I was super excited for this year, but it's definitely one I'm planning to read. The other book that I'm planning to pick up that I haven't read yet that came out pretty recently is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. She is the author of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell? I'm not sure. But I loved that book. I think I read it when I was a teenager, and so it has been a long time since she published a novel, like a very long time. And this looks like it's pretty short and maybe a little weird and different, but the reviews seem pretty good for that as well so far. So I'm very curious to see what she's come out with, and I hope I'll be able to get to that soon. So thanks so much for watching. Like I said, let me know what your most anticipated releases are for the rest of the year, especially if you have anything that is a new release. I would love to get introduced to some new authors right now. A lot of what I'm reading is continuations or books that are by people that I've already read books by. So let me know if there's anything you have your eye on.